Good morning, Honourable Minister and colleague. Good morning to members of the media, and welcome to this week's media briefing by the Minister in the Presidency for Electricity, Dr Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, who will be giving an update on the implementation of the Energy Action Plan. Once the Minister has given us the update, we will open the floor for questions from members of the media. The Minister is joined by Mr. Silas Zimu, the Special Advisor in the Ministry of Electricity. I'd like to now invite the Minister to commence with the briefing.
Thank you very much, Tsakani, and good morning to everyone. And once more, thank you very much to members of the media for making time to ensure that you are able to have this update covered so that we get to convey the message to the general public in the country, businesses, and everyone, so that there's a greater appreciation of the work that we are doing, and also just to ensure that there's an elevated level of transparency and accountability in the work that we are doing. We had indicated right at the onset of the introduction of the ministry that one of the key features of the ministry is to ensure that at every turn we are able to update the South Africans in relation to the performance of the grid, because this is a major challenge that is facing the country, and in fact is presenting a structural constraint to the South African economy. I'm very happy to indicate, as I stand before you here, that we are now beginning to turn the corner in relation to additional capacity. I indicated in our last briefing that the Kusile units are going to be indispensable to the resolution of this problem, and in the short term to help us to reduce the intensity of load shedding. And in the last briefing, I had indicated that in terms of our timeline, the first of the 3 units that had been discontinued, that were offline as a result of the issues associated with the flue gas desulfurization unit, which is really an engineering component that is meant to reduce the amount of sulfur content that is emitted into the atmosphere. As a result of the failures of that unit, we had to discontinue Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3 at Kusile to ensure that, one, we were able to address issues of safety. Secondly, to ensure that we don't exceed our license emissions parameters, because as a result of the desulfurization unit, the issues associated with that, we're going to exceed our licensing parameters as it relates to the issues of the sulfur that is emitted into the environment. So these units were discontinued in October of 2022. So as I speak to you, it has been almost a year that these units have not been operating. And essentially the South African economy and the grid was losing about 2,400 megawatts of generating capacity, because each unit gives us about 800 megawatts. And of course that contributed to a significant amount of strain that has been experienced on the grid, and this was particularly more acute when we went through the winter period because of elevated demand. We have been giving you an update on the speed with which we want to return these units. The number of issues that had required attention. First is to come with an interim mechanism, an interim measure, because we do expect that it's going to take us a considerable amount of time for us to be able to restore normality at Kusile. Normality in this instance means the restoration of the flue gas desulfurization unit, because before we do that, we also need to do a root cause analysis, which resulted in a significant amount of slurry that was deposited on the walls of the chimney, the 210-meter chimney that is meant to release the emissions into the atmosphere. And as a result of the slurry that was placed on these walls. It resulted in a potential threat to the structural integrity of the chimney. So we will have to do a root cause analysis, and the team is doing that root cause analysis. And we did project that as a result of us doing that root cause analysis and then introducing remedial measures, making sure that we return back the flue gas desulfurization unit. It will be important for us to seek an interim measure. The interim measure is necessary to allow us an opportunity to return the units as soon as possible into operation, so that the South African economy, the grid first, and the South African economy and households can benefit from the 2,400 megawatts which were discontinued as a result of the failure of this unit. Because there's a legislated framework for us to be able to request for an exemption, Eskom did lodge a request for an exemption, and the exemption in this instance meant that we are going to request the minister, the authority that is responsible, to allow us to have an interim measure, and we're going to put the temporary stakes to ensure that we return the units as quickly as possible. Of course, the downside of that is that although on other emission parameters we still are compliant, we're going to exceed the amount of sulfur content that is released into the atmosphere because we are bypassing the flue gas desulfurization unit. So we wanted an exemption in relation to that. So the authority gave us that exemption, and after the authority gave us an exemption, of course, there was a period that was extended to the public for anyone who has an objection to that exemption. And indeed, about 4 or so objections were received, and Eskom was duly invited to respond to those objections because Eskom is the one that has put in place the request for an exemption. We have, through assistance of some of the experts in the environmental space, we've been able to comprehensively respond to those objections, and primarily this had to do with the well-being of the communities within, if you like, the catchment area of the area where we have the Kusile, the footprint of the Kusile power station. We did comply with that. I must indicate that although we are seeking exemptions, although we do know that the net result of this exemption will mean that will not meet our emissions parameter as it relates to the sulfur dioxide, we have put in place measures to ensure that there's some degree of mitigation associated with that. And I must indicate that this is not into the future. Essentially, is this interim arrangement is for over a period of 12 months, because we have made a commitment to the ministry that by December of 2024 will restore normality in the form of the flue gas desulfurization unit and us remaining within the license parameters. And after we have responded to the objections in the most comprehensive fashion, the minister then came back to us and said that we are free to proceed with the commissioning of those units, and we must keep to the commitment that we have made in relation to the health issues, the mitigations that we are putting in place. And as a result of that approval by the minister, I'm happy to indicate that Kusile Unit 3, one of the 3 units, is now producing, is giving us the megawatts. Now, as I speak to you, it's giving us 550 megawatts, and we'll continue to ramp it up so that we get to anything 712 megawatts up to 800 megawatts. So I'm really excited to indicate that now we're beginning to turn the corner. In this instance, turning the corner simply means that we have that additional generating capacity. We are bringing back those 3 units, and then of course, in keeping with the last briefing, we will be retaining the other unit during the course of October, and then the last of the 3, of course, will also come in late October, early November. And then also still on the Kusile question, outside the 3 units that we are bringing on stream, which in total should give us a maximum of 2,400 megawatts, There's Unit 5, as indicated in the last briefing. We have every intention of starting the firing of Unit 5 sometime in December. So if you put all of these things together, of course, Unit 5 will gradually be put on stream. It will take a significant period of time because there's some degree of testing, taking it off at some periods, and then to ensure that when it gets out of being in the hands of the construction team into the hands of the operation team, the unit gets to operate. But we do foresee that we are going to generate those megawatts. And if you like, cumulatively, these 4 units should give us a maximum of 3,200 megawatts. And that's the point I'm making when I'm saying we're turning the corner, is that those units are coming back. And of course, the 3 units, they are going to reduce the unplanned capacity loss factor, the rate at which the units are failing. The units that are offline, of course, we're going to reduce that by a maximum, just on these 3 units, a maximum of 2,400 megawatts going into the future, the immediate future, as indicated. And that's why I had made the point to the general public that we are confident about the performance of this generating unit, including the work that we are doing in the other power stations. And I guess that everyone is able to see for him or herself the kind of progress that we are making. Let me just for a moment take you through what has been the performance of the previous week, like we always do during this briefing session. I do get to indicate what has been the general state of performance the previous Monday until Friday. What has been the average for the week is about 27,491 megawatts. And you can see that we still are at elevated levels of planned maintenance. The point I had made earlier on is that it is important that we keep to the discipline of maintenance so that when we return these units, the units remain online for a maximum period of time, and the amount of megawatts we are able to extract out of these units approximate their design capacity. So I think it's a discipline that we are gradually introducing, and of course this is made possible by the fact that the National Treasury has provided that fiscal relief, 254 billion rand to Eskom, and part of that gets to be invested in ensuring that we are able to sweat this asset, and sweating this asset will require that we exert a considerable amount of time on ensuring that we are able to observe planned maintenance. Of course, part of the legacy issues is that the discipline of planned maintenance almost compromised over a period of time, not out of Eskom's own making, but of course as a result of a compromised balance sheet. And that's why with this fiscal relief, it's possible for us to be able to invest in this planned maintenance. And the planned maintenance, the average was about 4,500 megawatts over that period. An area that is going to see significant improvement in the next 2 to 3 months is on the unplanned capacity loss factor. Remember that the unplanned capacity loss factor, remember that it examined 2 issues in the main. First is a rate of failure of these units, and the fact that the units as they operate, they are not they don't approximate their design capacity. So an area that is going to receive a significant improvement is the UCLF, because those 3 units at Kusile, because we discontinued them as a result of the reasons I've explained earlier on, that 2,400 megawatts is sitting in this 15,522 megawatts. That was the average of the past week. So essentially, if we begin to return them, we ramp them up. So there's a potential for us to remove a maximum of just 2,400 megawatts on that unplanned capacity loss factor. And of course, you can see that it will be way below the 14,000 megawatts. Remember that part of the targets we have set for ourselves is to ensure that the unplanned capacity loss factor is below the 14,000 megawatts. So the point I was making was that when they return, the unplanned capacity loss factor will be below 14,000 megawatts, not 4,000 megawatts. My apologies for that. So you can see that has got an immediate benefit. And as a result of these units coming back, it means that the available capacity now, we add those units. And if you had to look at the average of the past week of 27,491 megawatts, if you get this 2,000 plus megawatts, it means that you are close to 30,000 megawatts. So that's the kind of improvement that we'll be seeing going into the future, the next 2 to 3 months. And I have not yet accounted for Unit 5. Like I said, it will be on and off, but over a period of time, we're going to get consistent amount of megawatts from Unit 5 going into 2024. An area that remains an albatross that will require significant amount of attention is on the partial load losses. So you can see that the partial load losses continues to go up. We're at 8,285. Put that into context compared with the period May. Remember that May is our baseline. We're sitting at about 6,793 megawatts. So essentially there's a shift of about 1,500 megawatts of partial load losses. And that's something that is receiving a significant attention. It is important that we address all these matrices. We address the unplanned capacity loss factor. We are addressing the partial load losses. And of course, once you address that, and with the demand going down, it gives us an additional scope or space for us to be a bit more aggressive on planned maintenance without the need for us to intensify the stages of load shedding. So that's something that is receiving attention. And of course, we have not covered ourselves in glory. I want to make the commitment that we will focus on a special focus on the partial load losses. And of course, the outage slips, we have been doing relatively well, even though we are at 1,137. Put that into megawatts, put that into context. When we're using the baseline of May, it was at about 3,478. Of course, we want to reach those levels below 1,000 megawatts of outage slips, and this really talks to the degree to which we are able to do planning that is comprehensive, that is precise, to ensure that when we take the units out, we make the promise of retaining them on date X. We indeed keep to that promise of retaining the units on that date as promised. So these are the areas that are receiving attention, and I really want to indicate to the South African public that on a lot of these matrices, like I said, the unplanned capacity loss factor, we're making significant progress. The issues around the outage slips, we are making a significant progress. An area where there's significant reversals, like I said, is on the partial load losses. And of course, the partial load losses have got implications on the available capacity, because they eat into that available capacity, and therefore they have a contribution to the intensity of load shedding, and that's why they will receive attention going into the future. I must say that we will continue, like I said, on the planned maintenance, the cost that we have carved for ourselves to ensure that we really are able to return these units to better health. Of course, they are aging. I must accept that. There's so much you can extract out of these units. But of course, as an interim measure, in the context of an energy crisis, it's important that we're able to sweat these assets, and we really want to sweat them responsibly, and that's why planned outages are important for first engendering this discipline, ensuring that it constitutes part of, if you like, the value proposition at Eskom on how we want to see Eskom recovering. I think planned maintenance is important, and of course accepting that there are inherent risks in that. Of course, we're going to take calculated risks so that the country and the economy does not experience intensified levels of load shedding. So as I conclude, I really do think that the issue around the return of Kusile Unit 3, it's a significant milestone. It's a significant milestone. So what it simply means is that this weekend is a moving weekend, in that it begins to change the complexion of the game. And then you can see the confidence, I think, that we have placed on the management. The rate at which they were able to return these units ahead of time is something that is impressive. And we really want to say thank you to the acting groups, first the chair of the board, and the board, the acting group CEO, and also Mr. Bekin Numalo, who is the head of generation, and the team of men and women who are at Kusile, who have had sleepless nights, making sure that we are able to return this unit safely. They are able to perform. We are ahead of our time, and I really want to say to the team at Kusile, thank you very much. Of course, we still need to return the 2 other units. We still need to fire Unit 5 and then Unit 6, which is the last of the 6 packs at Kusile, as indicated, will come at the later stages of 2024. So this is the kind of progress we are making. We are registering progress, and I'm sure that the South African economy and the households will be relieved to know that we are making significant progress. Thank you very much, sir.
Wow, thank you very much, Minister. I'd also just like to introduce Ms. Daphne Mokoena, who's seated on the left side of the Minister. I've introduced Mr. Silas Zimo. We've also been joined by Eskom's head of generation, Mr. Bekin Numalo. We will now open the floor for questions from members of the media. And we'll start with the media that has joined us in the room. I see a hand up from Promit.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Minister, for the briefing. A couple of things. Okay. So I can see that the outage slip is around 1,250 megawatts on an average. Considering that around 2,400 megawatt is going to come online by end of October, does it mean that from November onwards load shedding will be minimal or almost no load shedding? That is first. And considering that this will be another 800 megawatts will be added by end of December, then the outlook for January looks even more positive. Am I right about that? That is first. Secondly, Kusile will start operating and it will still be emitting its SOx, exceeding its SOx limits. What I want to understand is that how much will it be exceeding in terms of what is the current allowance and what will be exceeding? And this is under the existing plant standards. When the new plant standards are implemented, new emission standards, will it again start lagging behind? That is the second. Third is, you had said last week that you will also be giving us some details on the transmission sector funding, most probably this week. I can say it has not happened, but can you tell us when will it be? Thank you.
Thank you. Can you please give us your name and your media house before you give us your question?
Antoinette Slowert, Rapport. Minister, you said some time ago that you were very worried about Kuiberg and that you were unable to find out what's really going on. I just wanted to find out whether you know now what's going on and can share it with us, and what you think the risk is of units being out of service at the same time. Thanks.
Thank you, Antoinette. Do we have any more questions in the room? If not, Ishmael, do we have questions online?
Yes, thanks, Chair. We have one question from Helmo Prias, Independent Media. Minister, when will the IRP be released? Thank you.
Is that the only question, Ishmael?
Yes, for now.
Okay, thank you. All right. Mr. Numalo will take the podium, followed by the Minister. Thanks.
Good morning, Minister and members of the media and the public. I think let me start with the Kuiberg one. I think we did also during the media brief last week indicate the status of Kuiberg, that we have now finalized the replacement of the new steam generators. All three of them are in position. And then also I did indicate that Last week, the regulator has given us a go-ahead. That was last weekend. We received a go-ahead from the regulator to reload the reactor. So which means now we are in the process of doing all the necessary tests after the reload, and then we will start with the commissioning. So we are still on schedule for the 3rd of November to return this unit as we indicated, and then on the 7th, Unit 2 will also come offline. And then the risk of the 2 units coming off next year, July, I think we are working with the regulator on that one. We have submitted to the regulator the request to separate the 2 licenses of Unit 1 and Unit 2 because they were not commercialized at the same date. So the regulator did ask for additional information, which we have submitted. So they are following their process. We will, once we have received feedback from the regulator, then we will come back and report where we are. So, but I think we are working very well with the regulator, and we have given what. Then I promised you were asking the issue about the stages of load shedding as we return the units. I think the minister rightfully indicated that we did say that Kusile is critical to our return for the load shedding, and I'm sure you noticed that I was a bit later as well. I was talking with the team outside. The minister have not even briefed him that we actually also have cancelled the load shedding that was planned for this evening. So we will go through like yesterday without load shedding today as well. And I think those are the positive signs that we continued. And when there's opportunity for us and for the country to get some reprieve on this load shedding, we will do so as well. And then working with the system, obviously the system operator, they assess the situation independent of us from generation, but we are together watching the system daily. So as you could see that this return of this first unit at Kusile, actually it's the second unit, Minister, we committed the first time that we will bring unit 4, and we brought it on time, before time as well. And I think, Minister, with unit, and it's also good for the station as well. It's not nice to be in the station where there's no units running, you know, the morale at the teams at Kusile. So I want to thank Christopher Zandi and our partner contractors on site as well, because it really is the teamwork. Everyone on site understands the impact of this load shedding. So we are quite happy with that. So we are obviously now as we're going into winter and to summer as well, there's other challenges that will come. We will ramp up, especially around December. The maintenance period will be higher. But so long as we continue to drive the unavailability low, it will help with that balance. That's what we want to see as well, that the load shedding, we drive it to as low as possible. That gives us a buffer so that if we have a bad day, we are able to deal with the issues. You know, you did also touch on the issues of sulfur in coal. Obviously, whatever comes in, you know, sulfur is something that you can't remove it in coal. You know, your normal coal will have, say, 0.2 to around 5% sulfur, but in the South African context, around 2%, 1.6. So that's what you will not be able to take it out of the coal. But the good thing is that all other particulate emissions, they are all being met as well. So that is really the issue, that the sulfur we will not be able to remove. And that is the only element that is currently not being removed, which is then in line with the rest of the fleet on the coal side. Yeah, in terms of the new standard, obviously the standards on the old plant applies up until 2030, and then from there we will then take it from there, what's happening, working together with the Department of Environmental Affairs, and then that's really currently the plan. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you very much, Becky, and maybe just to the point that Becky raises on the Every time when you have an opportunity, when this significant amount of generation, we will do everything possible to ensure that we provide some degree of reprieve in relation to load shedding. I think this is important also for the team. It's a psychological thing, just to say that we have gone through, if you like, it's going to be almost like 2 days without load shedding. Of course, I do accept it's over the weekend, and the amount of demand really is low. But that's significant. It shows that we're getting towards something, an end goal in mind. So it has to start somewhere, and I think it's these small gains. They'll accumulate over time, and then you'll see that we will get out of this very, very difficult situation. And also promise just to indicate, yes, on the transmission issues, we're still having those discussions internally. In fact, there were high-powered discussions that we had during the course of the week involving also the President, just giving guidance on what should underpin the thinking, which was particularly helpful, so that, I mean, some of the insights he has brought to the table is helping us to better shape what is going to be our response in relation to the transmission side. And to Helmut, yes, DMRE brought to Cabinet a update with regards to a IRP. So wherever Cabinet approved the modeling, and I'm sure that the DMRE colleagues will engage with the various stakeholders. So we have agreed on the modeling, and then the commitment in terms of that report is that by the end of October, the end of this month, we are going to get the IRP out for public consultation. So to your answer is that by end of this month, that's the commitment we got from the Department of Minerals, Resources and Energy, that the IRP should be out by the end of October. And I think Becky has dealt with many other questions.
Thank you very much, Minister and Becky Ngumalo. We will now take the last round of questions. Do we have any more questions in the room? Ishmael, do we have questions online?
Yes, Chairperson. We have a follow-up question from Helmo Prias, Independent Media. Minister, any progress on the appointment of the CEO? And the last question is from Terence Creamer, Engineering News. Minister, how many ESCOM coal plants are currently not meeting their minimum emission standards, and what are the estimated health and economic costs of this non-compliance? Given that several of these plants are unlikely to meet their MES obligations, should we expect ongoing applications for postponements and exemptions? Are resources being set aside to compensate communities whose rights are being violated by this ongoing failure to comply? That's all for now. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you very much, Ishmael. I see we've got one last question in the room from Promit.
Promit here again from Reuters. Mr. Nomado, just what I was asking at that time was, what is the current limit given to Kusile, and by how much, since you are exceeding, and as Minister said, we will be exceeding till at least December 2024. So what is the amount that we are exceeding in terms of like 5 times, 6 times, whatever? That is what I want to understand.
Thank you, Promit. I think we'll start with Becky, followed by the Minister.
Thank you, Takan. I think maybe let me start with the question from Terence in terms of the coal plants that are not meeting the standard. I think one thing that you have noticed in the Minister's presentation is that the partial load losses are higher as well. Part of this is also to reduce load to deal with the emissions when the station has got some technical challenges. I think the biggest station that has got issues with the emission is Kendal. And then we have started working on Kendal as well to deal with the issues of particulate emissions in particular. You noticed that across the whole winter month, we had Unit 4 at Kendal that was busy. We were busy with an upgrade of the electrostatic precipitators, and we're also putting in new technologies called the high-frequency transformers to reduce the emissions levels at Kendal. And then immediately after that, we have taken Unit 3, is currently down as well. We are busy with this major upgrade on the other plant that had a problem was Matla. We are at Kriel. We're also busy with the second last unit at Kriel in terms of the upgrade of the emissions. So as the Matla plant, but Matla, we are now almost done with the precipitators. It was more the issue on the dust side. So I think in terms of the process that we are embarking on, Matimba does meet its standard as well. Matimba, we will find that we have also taken off some partial load losses at some point when they had issues with their ash plant, but there's no stations that we will not work towards meeting the current approved standard wherever it is possible. And then in terms of the Kusile, like I've indicated, the limit for particulate emission for Kusile is 50 milligrams per standard cubic centimeter. That is going to be met. So there's no exemption on that. The exemption that was only asked was on the sulfur content. So whatever comes in with coals as sulfur, if let's say the coal combined that is burnt at Kusile, it's got a sulfur content of 1.2%. So that's what we are not being able to remove, because we need that plant. But any other standard in terms of the emission is being met. That is the only component that is not being met at Kusile. So obviously, it's not going to be one value. It's within the range. Our coal, like I said, it will range between 0.2 to 2%. Sometimes you will have an average of 1.2, 1.6. That's what is going to be going out, because we cannot remove it with the current plant being off. But on average, because the other units like Unit 4, we are still removing everything. So Unit 4 is in compliance. So as Unit 5 is come as well. So it will be in compliance with the standard. So it's only these 3 units that are going to be not complying with the sulfur percentage reduction. But the rest of other and then we also part of the exemption by the minister was also for us to have here, which we are busy implementing, and then we will be reporting as well on that monitoring that was given to us as conditions of the approval as well. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you very much, Becky. Just on the issues of the CEO, of course, that's sitting with the shareholder representative, so that the DPE, I'm sure at the right time, you'll get an indication from my peer, the Minister Gordhan. And then I think Terence Creamer raises a fundamentally important question, because I think it's a bigger conversation. And I think the issue there, I can imagine, is around balancing, if you like, the health imperatives associated with these emissions, and generally, if you like, dirty fuel sources. I mean, and also the issues around, of course, the environment, and then there's also the issues around the socio-economic impact. So you can imagine that we're juggling these balls in the air. I mean, what we could have done with regards to the 3 units was to wait for 2024, end of 2024, so that Becky and the team get sufficient time to be able to attend to the issues associated with the flue gas desulfurization unit. We clean the chimney, we ensure that the structural integrity is in place. And if you do that, as Mr. Ngumalo has indicated, you are in a position to remove the sulfur. And of course, because you are removing the sulfur, then you are not endangering the local communities, their health, that is. So that's the option you could have taken, and not ask for exemptions just on the sulfur. And then The downside of that is that there's a cost to the economy, is that you are sitting with a situation of an energy deficit. So essentially the configuration of the generation will remain as is if there's no significant improvement from other power stations, and then we'll continue to experience intensified levels of load shedding. And the decision to go and ask for exemption is not an easy one, because we have an obligation, I can imagine, what is inherent in Terrence's question, to ensure that we protect the health and the environment. We have an obligation to that. And that's why in the approval of that exemption, there are stringent requirements that have been put into place. The point that Mr. Mlumal was making, the health plan in relation to that community, our ability to be able to detect how much is being emitted, and if those levels are essentially at a level where they pose an immediate danger to that community. So all of that has been put in place. So we are attempting to ensure that we are able to strike the balance in relation to our obligations to the environment, and those can be postponed, I must add. They can't be put further into the future. We have that immediate obligation, and we know what the emissions do to the environment. We can see the devastation that is causing all over the world, especially amongst the poor communities. So we can see what has happened, KZN and also part of the Northwest, and that has got the implications on food security, amongst others, going into the future. And again, there are those immediate needs with regards to the economy that must protect jobs, the economy that must continue to perform so that people are in employment, who are able to generate revenue for the national fiscus, who are able to support the comprehensive social wage that the South African government is providing. And of course, also in the midst of these challenges, the South African government has not retreated from continuing to provide that comprehensive social wage. And the conversations really about the prioritization, reprioritization, and those conversations are not about austerity, because we do and are still committed to that comprehensive social wage. And like I said earlier on, load shedding, the inefficiencies in the logistics area, they present a structural constraint. They are the ones that are throttling in the South African economy and making it very difficult for it to grow. And of course, there's casualties in relation to that. So, Kenneth, to your question, really, it's around balancing those. You are raising valid issues, and that's why it was important that we are able to illustrate to the executive authority that indeed we are not abrogating our responsibility in relation to protecting lives in those areas. We are doing something to ensure that we minimize the impact of what gets to be emitted into the environment. And of course, that question is going to come back, like Promet has indicated. Once the license of the current power stations come to their end, I mean, there's a conversation. Can you continue to operate this if you want to extend their lives? Because they are unlikely going to meet the stringent emissions parameters. But we also know what is the cost to the South African economy. And that's why it's important that you are accelerating the onboarding of renewables. And that's why transmission conversation is important. So that when we get to that stage, we know that there's a sufficient capacity that is coming from cleaner sources of energy that makes the conversation really academic, because we'll be having sufficient generating capacity coming from cleaner sources. And if you don't resolve that, kicking the can down the road on the transmission side, that problem is going to confront us at that time. And I can tell you that, if you like, 6 years is just around the corner. From a point of view of energy sovereignty, finding new generating sources, the kind of financing, the complexity of these projects and their implementation, it's important that you start very early in anticipation of that future, so that we don't have a conversation of balancing health and the socio-economic objective. We are able to do both, and the renewable cleaner sources of energy is going to help us to do that. The hydro, nuclear, and of course, gas is a step down from emissions perspective relative to coal. So it's important that that conversation must happen. And of course, you'll still have Kusile Midupi going into the future, but of course, we are removing the sulfur content there. So it's important, like I said, just bringing together this conversation relative to the work that we are doing on the transmission side. So you can see that transmission is key really to answering Kenneth's question. And then there was an issue, I think, that was raised much later on public procurement, the next round of public procurement. The commitment was that it will be done by September. Obviously, that has not happened. And of course, our colleagues from the IPP office, led by DMRE, have made that commitment that it's something that they are accelerating. I'm sure once I get the new dates, I'll come back and share that with you, so that there's an appreciation that we are indeed committed to this decarbonization agenda, and it ties up to the question I raised earlier on. We need to ensure that we are driven by some degree of agency to address these questions going into the future. So I really want to say thank you very much to Mr. Numalo, the team there at Kusile for the excellent work. And of course, we are getting another reprieve today. We will not have load shedding, and of course, they'll keep a close eye on the system. And it's we want to get to a stage where there's more and more days where there's no load shedding. And of course, like I said, the return of these units are important. The Kusile units, they sit on the critical path, and that's why they say that elevated attention that is given to these units. And of course, in addition to the other work that we are doing on the demand side, we have not abandoned that work. We still continue to preach that message on use as and when is necessary. So that, and I think even in the conditions of abundance, when you have excess generating capacity, I think the new way of doing things, essentially, we should not be wasteful going into the future. But I really want to take the opportunity to thank the members of the media and the people back at home for taking time to listen to this update. Like I said, we are committed to transparency. We are committed to accountability. Where there are missteps, where there are potholes, we'll share that with you, the levels of difficulty, but most importantly, what is it that we are doing to ensure that we are addressing this situation. And I want to give you my word. We're doing everything possible, working with a competent, patriotic, and experienced team at ESCOM to ensure that we resolve this load shedding question. The single biggest problem that is facing us of existential proportions, which has caused significant harm to the South African economy and way of life. And that's why we eat, live, and sleep the resolution of this problem. And we are committed and confident about our collective ability to resolve it in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Ramokgopa. And thank you as well to Mr. Begin Malo, as well as to the members of the media. We have come to the end of this week's media briefing. We'll reconvene again next week, as we do so weekly. Thank you very much.